In our system,
So let's call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Directors of South Tahoe Public Utility District to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And it's nice to see so many people here. Very nice. So do we have any comments from the audience? Do we have anybody calling in, or? We do? Okay. Do we have Director Sepulveda on the line?
I'm here.
All right. Let's go. Okay, I see no comments from the audience. How about corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar? All right. I will then move adoption of the consent calendar.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Push the vote out to you. Director Sepulveda, how would you like to vote on this item?
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimous.
Okay, that moves us to item 6A, water and sewer capacity charge study. And that is Mr. Hughes.
Yes, thanks, Kelly. I want to see if somebody's on the line. Sean Korn, are you on the line right now? If you're muted, go ahead and hit *6 on your phone.
I am here. Good afternoon.
Great, okay. So Sean Korn with HDR, obviously he's on the line now, and so he'll be available for any questions that anybody may have for his proposal. So today we're requesting the board approve the proposal from HDR Engineering to prepare new water and sewer capacity charge studies for the district. Obviously the cost of this proposal from HDR is well within the general manager's spending limit, but we thought it would be a good idea to have it on action just due to the recent interest the community has had in the district's capacity charges, and just to be completely transparent with this project from the very beginning. So what we've discussed fairly recently, the water and sewer capacity charge reports for the district have not been updated since 2006 and 2008, quite some time ago, and much of this information used to prepare these reports is now stale and outdated, including the district's current infrastructure and future improvement plans. Also, the district really doesn't have an equitable or a legitimate way to apply its current capacity charge structure to certain projects at reduced cost without creating the gifting of public funds scenario. So Sean Korn with HDR, he's been the district's service charge rate consultant for about 10 years now, but he also has extensive experience developing capacity charge studies, and including several right here in the basin. And for these agencies, he has developed capacity charges that have a fixed and variable component, which does allow for flexibility when applying these fees to different projects or size of units. This project is expected to take about 6 months, and if you had a chance to go to the proposal, you'll see it included several meetings with district staff and 3 in-person public presentations here at the district during regular board meetings to hopefully ensure complete transparency to the board, public, and especially the development community throughout the entire process. So I'll pause there for a moment and see if anybody has any questions either for myself or for Sean. No? Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and read the motion. So the requested board action is to approve the proposal from HDR Engineering to prepare water and sewer capacity charge studies in an amount not to exceed $32,625.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Director Sepulveda, how would you like to vote on this item?
I vote yes.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
Okay, that brings us to 6B, 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and Water Shortage Contingency Plan adoption, and that's Chris. And so I believe we're going to open a public hearing right now. And Chris,
All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon. It's nice to see everybody in person again. Here today to talk about the Urban Water Management Plan and the Water Shortage Contingency Plan. The California Urban Water Management Plan became part of the California Water Code in 1983-84 and has to be updated every 5 years. The primary requirements for the Urban Water Management Plan includes a description of the water service area, a description of existing planned supply sources, estimates of past, present, and projected water use, an assessment of water supply reliability, and a description of the conservation program. That's just a short background, a little bit on the Urban Water Management Plan. The Water Shortage Contingency Plan was combined with the Urban Water Management Plan for a period of time, but now the state has mandated it to be a standalone plan. The plan is to basically prepare in advance responses to various water shortage conditions. Without these plans in place, we might not have the opportunity to receive state grant money. So with that, you're probably tired of hearing me talk already. So I'm going to turn this over to Sachi from Kennedy Jenks. They're the ones that helped prepare, or did prepare the plans here. And she's going to give a short presentation, a little bit better background than I just gave you. And that'll also give you a chance for any questions. Sachi, are you there?
Hi, I am here. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Okay, terrific. So thank you and good afternoon to the board and to staff that are there. Always a pleasure to work with South Tahoe Public Utility District. And as Chris mentioned, a really brief kind of overview presentation. Just introduce what are the contents, the key elements, and then let you get on to the completion of the hearing and the options. So next slide, please. So I'm just going to give you a snapshot overview of the key elements of the Urban Water Management Plan related to demand projection, compliance with the SBX 7-7 or 20 by 2020, and kind of what is the status of your water resources and supply reliability. And then I'll also do the same for the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, which, as Chris mentioned, is an appendix. It's Appendix G to the Urban Plan, and it has a couple new elements. One is an annual assessment. Another is a drought risk assessment, which is of interest to a lot of water agencies now because of where we are in our current hydrology. And then the shortage stages that might be applicable to South Tahoe, and then brief discussion about adoption and timeline. So next slide, please. So why an update? As Chris mentioned, it's required every 5 years by the Urban Water Management Plan Act. It updates lots of documents like any planning evaluations of how much water, how reliable the water is, and any water quality issues. It also connects with the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, or as in Tahoe, it's the I believe it's an alternative plan. So we worked really closely with the district's hydrogeologist, Ivo Bergson. He actually put a lot of input in how to coordinate things that are required under the urban plan and reports that are required under the annual reporting for groundwater. In some agencies, it also informs things like water supply planning. So if there were a lot of expansion, then you would need to know, where in your areas it would expand. That's not necessarily the case here. And then, as Chris mentioned, now it requires a separate water shortage contingency plan. And finally, it is important to do this plan because it maintains eligibility for state grants. And we worked a lot with Lynn Nolan, your grants coordinator. I know she's on top of all of this. And in fact, just today we had a call with one of my colleagues who knows one of the folks at State Water Board, Mike Downey, used to work for KJ, and he said, "Hey, how are these urban plans going? They're not posted yet." So they're paying attention. So that's another reason it's important. So next slide, please. So key elements. as Chris mentioned, it's about water use, and they divide it by sector in the upper left. That would be things like whether it's residential, commercial, industrial. Most of the district is either residential or commercial. And then going to the lower left, water quality, things that could impact supplies. And I've worked with the district on some of the PCE contamination. I know there's been, I think, uranium. And so, we recognize that those challenges could exist and document those. To the upper right, description of all supply sources. You are all on groundwater. Surface water is a possibility, but it's really not used. In some agencies, right, there's imported water, there's recycled water, but fortunately, the district supplies are pretty straightforward. And then on the lower right, supply reliability, not only to meet your current customers, but any future customers in a range of hydrologic year types, whether it's a normal year, a single dry year, or as it seems right now that we're into multiple dry years. This urban plan is now a 5-year drought assessment. It used to be just 3 years. So that is now more the reality here in California, unfortunately. So next slide, please. So just a quick snapshot of what does the future water usage look like in the district. This was based on some work that KJ did with the district about 1.5 years ago to look at what's a build-up demand. So we've divided the demands into 4 major types, which is single family, which is really the lion's share, multifamily, commercial, which includes the institutional tourism, and then water losses. And water losses are just losses that you can't account for between what you pump out and then what you deliver to your customers via meters. A lot of great work that staff has done to get customers metered, and that will reflect when we talk about the 20 by 2020 as well. The growth rate that you're seeing is pretty modest. It's based on an El Dorado County growth rate of about 0.37%. So it's, as I say, pretty modest, and that's per year. So, you're well under your build-out demand estimate with this growth rate. Next slide, please. The FBX 7-7 compliance, this was something that was first established in 2010, where the governor had mandated, and the legislature had mandated trying to reduce consumption, within the state of California 20% by the year 2020. So now we're here. So the first line is the historic baseline water use. So back, we looked at the district staff looked at the 1996 to 2004 period as your baseline, a 10-year period, and that had a gallons per capita or per person per day of 226. From that, you subtract 20% to get to your line 2, the 2020 goal of 181. And what was the actual in 2020? It was actually 173. So did the district and your customers meet your goal? Yes, absolutely. And this is in spite of the fact that I think, because of COVID, you had kind of more visitation, maybe people who were second homeowners coming to their homes more. So in spite of that, you still met your goal. So kudos to the district and to staff. And I also think that, the metering that's been going on the last several years has really helped your customers know, right, how much water they're using. So contributed to this as well. Next slide, please. Water resources and supply reliability is obviously very important. Mentioned that we worked with EVO and the groundwater, team in looking at the Tahoe South Subbasin, which is in the orange, on the graphic there. It is a very robust water supply. The district has 11 active wells and 4 standby wells that together can produce over 20,000 acre-feet per year. And if you remember from the slide before, your demands are much less than that. They're in the order of about, in 2045, maybe 6,000 acre-feet per year. So, and not only does it kind of, if you can produce over 20,000, you're only using 6. There was a lot of modeling that Desert Research Institute does for the district that looks at this groundwater supply over not only normal years, single dry, but also multiple dry years. And under all those conditions, modeling indicates that the supply is more than sufficient to meet that demand. So next slide, please. So that's the good news. I wanted to now shift to the water shortage contingency plan. There are a number of key elements, and I'll touch on a few of these. There is a water supply reliability analysis, which includes a 5-year drought risk assessment. So I'll present what that looks like, the next 5 years might look like for the district. It also includes an annual water supply and demand assessment procedure. So starting in 2022, the district will be required to look kind of every spring at, are you going to have enough water to meet your needs in the future? And I'll have a slide on that as well. There's a few, changes in that the state is now requiring 6 water shortage stages, so I'll present on that as well. And then in addition, a few other topics, what would the district do if you needed to have your customers reduce their usage because of a water shortage? So there's quite a detailed list in there that we worked with Shelley, who works in communications and water use efficiency. A lot of that is because you work with your customers to reduce demands. And so that's why communications protocols are important, and then monitoring and reporting to make sure that the reductions in water usage that you need to get are being achieved. So next slide. So the annual assessment procedure, as I mentioned, this is something that will become due next year. So they ask in the water shortage contingency plan that we document what is the district going to do to do this annual assessment. So in working with Evo, he has to do an annual report for the groundwater. And so we wanted to make sure that these 2 activities lined up and that you weren't duplicating efforts. So I'm not going to expect you to read this, but in December and January, Evo starts looking at some of the data from the snow survey station, right? And he looks at the groundwater elevation monitoring data and starts to look at the pumpage. So he starts doing that in the fall, winter, early winter. There is an update to the groundwater model that occurs kind of the February-March timeframe. He looks at a water budget, and he looks at trends. Like, is there a trend towards, a lot of multiple dry years? He looks at trends in water usage and things like that. And then by April, he has drafted an annual report for DWR for the groundwater basin. And this report comes to the board as a public hearing. And he's continuing, though, to look at these trends and how much water is being recharged, right, from snowmelt and groundwater pumping and things like that. And if it looks like there's going to be some kind of shortfall, which is unlikely, then maybe some public outreach might start. And then in the June period, Eva's going to work on the annual water supply and demand assessment report that's required under the water shortage contingency plan and get that submitted to DWR by July 1st. So there's about a 2-month lag between the annual report for groundwater in April and this annual water supply and demand assessment. And if you need the customers to do more to reduce their usage, then more public outreach and messaging and things like that, and then monitoring. So that's the basic cycle and the basic assessment procedure. Next slide, please. So we're clearly in a drought, so wanted to give you a snapshot view of what does the next 5 years look like, 2021 through 2025 at the top. The first row is gross water use. That includes, really what would get pumped out of the groundwater basin and delivered to your customers, right? So we're expecting that if, what little growth does occur, this is the estimate of how much water usage you might need in the next 5 years. And then the total supplies, that is, these are based on the groundwater model, a very conservative, long duration drought assumption. So if we assume 5 dry years in a row, what would, the estimates on supply look like? And so that's why the numbers vary a little bit. They go up and down. It's because it assumes there's a drought in the groundwater model. But in any of these cases, in the next 5 years, you have ample supply to meet your gross water use. So that's why the percent reduction, you don't have to, it's not anticipated that the district will have to implement the water shortage contingency plan actions in order to reduce water usage. So next slide, please. The other thing I wanted to mention is this change from 3 shortage stages, which is currently in the district admin code. This is like a cross-reference table, to the 6 shortage stages that DWR is requesting agencies analyze for. So there's a first stage one is up to 10%, and that overlaps with the second stage with the district admin code 1. And that assumes that, if you needed to do something, it's a minor supply reduction. The shortage stages 3, 4, and 5 overlap with district admin code stages 2, and that could be a significant supply reduction, right? And then a shortage level 6, which is greater than 50%, would be in line with the district's admin code 3, and that could be a pretty big water emergency, maybe a wildfire or something like that, on top of perhaps supplying other neighboring communities. So that's kind of a worst case. A wildfire, though, would be one would expect relatively short duration. Fortunately, you do have a robust groundwater basin. So that's, kind of how these things map, and worked closely with Shelley and Evo to kind of make sure that this all makes sense and that staff would know what to do, right, if you had to call one of these shortage stages. So next slide, please. So adoption and timeline, we're in the public hearing. We're about to do that today. The district board will be asked to adopt the urban plan and the water shortage contingency plan, and then we will work with staff to get this uploaded and submitted to DWI by July 1st. And it also goes to the state library on a CD-ROM, believe it or not, and then city and county, and we're likely to distribute those just as web links to the district's website. So with that concludes kind of my main presentation. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
I was curious, do we know what attributed to the reductions that exceeded the state mandate? Was it primarily landscaping, or, kind of that pie chart of what was?
I don't know. Often it is. So irrigation, right, is often a big component of water usage. But I think there's a couple things that happened. The district started to really focus on metering in the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years. And I think customers have much better handle on how much water they're using. So I think people are like, and I guess you're going to be doing a rate study update, but the best way to save money, honestly, as a user, is to reduce your usage, right? And you can use rates to, there's something called either water budget rates that would give a customer that had a lot of landscape, for example, a budget that would be equivalent to the evapotranspiration rate, that this is what the plants would need. And so I think the metering actually also really did contribute a lot, as well as kind of just there's a kind of an environmental ethos, I think, in the basin too.
I think she's absolutely right. Even in my neighborhood, there was a lot of high water users, and once the meters came through, there's a lot less water used because of the meters.
And this is kind of an off-the-wall question, but just as I think about kind of California and water, you seem to be in an incredibly fortunate situation. I mean, I can't imagine that's indicative of much of the state. So, or how unique are we, I guess, is the question, as far as kind of our supply of water given that 5-year drought kind of situation.
I think you are unique in that you have a very large groundwater basin relative to the usage. So certainly, we have other clients who, particularly in Southern California, where they might be very dependent on imported water, and so they're scrambling, right? So.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Did you ask for public comment?
Yes. I thought I did, but I will do so more clearly. Are there any comments from the public? So I guess we will close the public hearing, and
I was going to read the requested board action, but Gary would like to add a couple things. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I talked briefly with John earlier and Chris just a minute ago. I was going to suggest just a slight modification to the proposed board action. So it would read, adopt resolution number 3190-21 for approval of the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and Water Shortage Contingency Plan adoption, subject to minor adjustments by staff and legal counsel prior to submitting to DWR.
I'm sorry, Gary, prior to submission, what was the rest of that, prior to?
Prior to submitting to DWR.
Thank you.
Okay. So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, that was by Ronco, second? Okay, here's the vote. And Director Stefano, how would you like to vote on this item?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is it working?
For some reason, your screen seems to be acting up. I don't know what
Yeah,
it is.
it did a couple meetings ago.
Yeah, I remember.
I was saying,
Okay. President Sheehan is voting yes, and that motion passes unanimous.
Thank you very much.
thank you, Chris. Okay, looks like Julie's gonna talk to us about tank coating touch-up.
Good afternoon. I am here to present to you the results of the recent tank coating touch-up bid, but before I do that, I want to get into a little bit of the background behind the need for this project as just sort of a reminder. We started talking about our water tanks and sewer tanks in a little bit more gory detail in the last couple of years, as we have noticed, particularly on the water side, a number of those tank coatings starting to deteriorate, sometimes prematurely, and really needing to step up our periodic maintenance, get into a better routine to help prolong the life of those assets. The district has 20 water tanks and 4 wastewater tanks, 2 of them here at the wastewater treatment plant and 2 out at Luther Pass. And all of those tanks are critical to our operations. As we build our asset management program, we'd really like to see those tanks last for 100 years. And as you're all aware, some of our tanks are falling far short of that. We're in the process of demolishing a 30-year-old tank out at Luther Pass due to excessive corrosion in the headspace. And so we're trying to rectify that problem, and this particular bid is our first step towards a plan for that. We had considered hiring outside a firm to take over the management of our tanks in their entirety. We got some really mixed feedback from amongst the industry about the value of those sorts of programs, the level of care that those providers provide to the district for the cost. And so rather than going that way, we decided we're gonna try doing it ourselves. Our pumps crew has been very diligent about keeping up with periodic dive inspections. Those divers go in and do small touch-up work on coatings when they're in there. And they do that on a frequent cycle. They drain and clean the tanks every 5 years. But we didn't really have a program in place for us to get inside tanks that are seeing bigger problems and fixing those problems in a timely manner in such a way that we can really extend the life of our assets. So we developed a plan that will allow us to continue that dive program every couple of years, which is a really cost-effective way to keep an eye on our tanks. It costs no more than a couple $1,000s per tank to go in and do that dive inspection and touch-up. And then every 5 years, take each tank offline, drain it, clean it, do more extensive touch-ups, bringing that interior coating in particular back to like a fully functional state. We can do any repairs on the tank at that time, replacing screens, replacing cathodic protection, work on interior piping. And then set up our capital program to do full recoatings every 20 years if the tank needs it, both interior and exterior. With this program in place, we may find that we don't need to do full recoatings every 20 years. We may be able to make those coatings last a lot longer. But what we've been seeing is we're having to do some major repairs on Angora tank and EcoView tank. Those coatings were installed in 2010. Anyway, this is our first pass. This bid that we just advertised, that will be the coatings work for the first 2 years of the new asset management program. So we've got 6 tanks on the plan. One to three of those will be done this summer, and the remainder will be done next summer. We're really paying attention to when the work is being done. I think that part of the reason we've seen premature failures of coatings on our tanks is because the coatings are going in too late in the season. Temperatures are getting cold. They struggle with their environmental controls, and they're just not getting a good bond. And so we're saying, well, if you can do whatever you can get done between the time the contract is signed and the end of September, but we're not letting you work any later than that. And then, we'll have the entire season next season to do the remainder up to September 30th. So getting a little bit of a late start this summer, but not too bad. The 6 tanks include 4 water tanks out in the system that have some of the most immediate needs, and then 2 tanks here at the wastewater treatment plant. That'll be a bit of a challenge for one of them. One is our backwash tank that was constructed in 2011. We have seen that the part they call the knuckle, it's where it curves from the wall onto the roof, has completely, the coating has completely peeled on the interior on the south face, where it's got that heavy sun exposure. So it's going to have to be off for a matter of weeks in order to do the surface prep and recoating and get it cured before that tank is put back online. That's going to require some additional expenses being incurred by the wastewater treatment plant to make that happen, because we use that tank on a daily basis to clean the filters. And so it's going to have to be empty that whole time. We're going to have to probably bring in some Baker tanks and change up our operations to accommodate this. But we're working closely with the wastewater treatment plant to make sure that that goes smoothly in light of the other multiple projects that they are juggling out there at the same time. So any questions on kind of the need and background before I get into the details of the bid?
Have we worked with this contractor before?
We have never worked with this contractor before. Happy to see a new face. We have a long experience working with FAR or RDC, who they use both names. They were the second low bidder, we've had good experiences with their work. They did the aeration basins out here a couple years ago, which was a specialized coating, and I just saw signs of it yesterday. We were looking inside one of the vaults out here, and it's holding up really well. So we have had good experience with them, but I'm always happy to have a new contractor to work with so that we have some options. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. So this project, the opportunity was advertised on May 11th, and we closed the bid period on June 3rd, so a relatively short period. We received 4 bids. There was a wide range of prices, $158,300 to $330,300. So it's $158,300 to $330,300. We didn't have a really good sense of what this was going to cost because we've never done it in this way before. We had estimated about $154,000 in total for the completion of this work. So we didn't come in too far off what we actually got for a low bid. So pretty happy with that, and this will inform our future estimates, so we're not cutting it quite so close. We did a review of the 3 lowest bids, and in that review, we found minor deviations, which have been summarized for you in the attachment to the agenda item. Since the time that Heidi performed this review, we did find one additional deviation, irregularity in the bid that I want to make sure that you're aware of. We do believe that it is immaterial and thus waivable. But the document itself was signed by a project manager, not an officer of the company, and so that raised a concern with us. And so we conferred with legal counsel, including talking to Gary about the implications of that. And because the bid bond was signed by the president, the bid bond itself is considered valid and secure, and so we are recommending that we waive the irregularity that the project manager signed it. They will also provide a bid certification upon our request that the president basically says that the project manager has the authority to sign this contractual obligation on behalf of the company. So with that, we're requesting that you waive all the minor irregularities that we identified, and these relatively clean bids, to be honest, and award the project to Top Line Engineers.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have.
Would you like me to read it in its entirety, or are we good?
Or you can say the motion is stated in the agenda item.
Okay, so are you moving as stated in the agenda item?
Say it?
Are you moving as stated in the agenda item?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. Director Sepulveda, how would you like to vote on this item?
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to 6D, which is Tahoe water supply. Dave's going to take a little break for the next 3 items and then come back.
I'm going to recuse from the next item. I think I can come back for the E&F as long as I don't vote, correct? I've recused from the negotiations of these, but it looks like it's negotiated. No, you should wait till after the next 3 are concluded. All right, call me when you're ready. Sorry. Literally, that's what they've done. One of the reasons why.
Okay, John.
Okay, thank you. This action item is to approve a reimbursement agreement with the Tahoe Keys Property Owners Association for the Keys to reimburse the district for costs related to developing and evaluating alternatives for a long-term district water supply to the Keys. Tahoe Keys requested that we look into various alternatives, and these include a wholesale water agreement and up to a total asset acquisition, whereby Keys customers would become district customers. The costs related to these efforts include our own staff time, as well as legal time and engineering professional services coming up. And Gary, I understand the Keys have requested some modifications to this agreement. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, in looking at the agreement, they've asked, rather than, I'll say, having a carte blanche reimbursement agreement, that we include some maximum amount to be reimbursed as draft, as initially executed, but then allow for that to be increased as more costs are known. And so essentially it would set an initial amount that is yet to be determined. And then if the district kind of is approaching that maximum amount, that the district would send a let Tahoe Keys know, well, we think it's gonna cost another X dollars, get authorization from the Keys to increase that amount, and then, continue under that, authorization. And that may reoccur on a regular basis, depending on how accurate, you know, the costs are, or how much work's gonna need to be done. In talking with John and Paul, we've come up with some language to modify what's in the, agreement right now. And maybe what I'll do is read to you what we're proposing the revised language, to read like. And it's basically revising the first sentence and adding an additional sentence after the first sentence of section 3 of the reimbursement agreement. And the proposed language that we've come up with is to read as follows. The association shall reimburse the district in monthly installments based on the progress of the evaluation performed by the district commencing on May 3rd, 2021, in an amount not to exceed this. We don't have a number yet, blank right now, and that's going to be called the reimbursement limit. If the district believes the evaluation will exceed the reimbursement limit, the district shall discontinue the evaluation until TKPOA authorizes an increase in the reimbursement limit in writing. And so that would be the change. And so that would be the immediate change right now. In the approval, the board decides to approve the agreement as drafted with this change, it would be authorizing staff to work with TKPOA to come up with the initial reimbursement limit to insert in the agreement.
Okay, thanks, Gary. And I think I've kept the board pretty well informed on this issue. We talked about it, I think it's just probably every meeting for the past few months, so I think you're expecting this before you're here today. So any questions or comments before we open it up to the proposed board action?
Is there anything else you think we need to know about the situation out there?
Not really. I think it's a continuation of, I can run through it real quick. They're adding treatment systems on wells 2 and 3. Lukens is working on the intertie on 15th Street. We're still waiting for the state to approve the treatment system on Lukens well number 5. Our intertie with the Keys is still closed, but can be open at any minute should they give us a call. We just have one valve at this point to open. And we're really waiting for them to install a backflow assembly before we just open that entirely. And we understand that that's perhaps 4 or so weeks out. So all of those things are happening. A little more about the Lukens water fill station. In the month of, there's about 100,000 gallons used for that purpose in May. I think we're at 190,000 so far in June. So, at least doubling in the month of June. I think we still have 7 contractors that are working with Jen, and she's enforcing all of their water conservation measures. And those tenders are about 500 gallons apiece, so you can do the math. Maybe looking at 400 trips over the course of a month. So that's the latest on the Keys. Any other questions or comments?
I guess I'm just curious, how is the home been, or I guess tenor been with the Keys thus far? I would anticipate it'd be fairly optimistic since we're positive since they've requested we've taken this action. But kind of in your negotiated spirit for this agreement, has it been kind of a positive start to this relationship? Or I would say to this particular function within this relationship?
I would say so. Actually, Gary, you've had a whole lot of
interaction with the Keys. Everything's, I think, has come through district staff.
Yeah, I've been, talking a lot and worked a lot with Kurt, So, of course, we're working well together. I think they certainly appreciate the district stepping up and taking a look at these alternatives. We've already provided them with a draft RFP for engineering services. So they're taking a look at that, and pending the approval of this agreement and their review of that engineering RFP, we'll push this down the road and get some work done for them. Okay, Gary, would you like to actually read the proposed board action?
Sure. It would be to approve the reimbursement agreement with Tahoe Keys Property Owner Association with the modifications of what's read into the record, and to authorize district staff to work with Tahoe Keys to determine the reimbursement limit amount.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Director Sepple, how would you like to vote on this item?
Yes.
Thank you. And the motion passes unanimous with Director Peterson recusing himself.
Okay, that moves us to item 6E, Union Memorandum of Understanding. John,
Yeah,
Paul, and Liz.
I'll take this, and we have Liz online if there's any questions. So this action is to approve the this is the union MOU agreement. As previously discussed with the board and per our tentative agreement with the union, it's a 3-year agreement with a 2.5% cost of living adjustment each of those years, and then a salary survey provision at the end of that final year. We've also made some changes that incorporate various side letters and other edits that have come up over the course of the current MOU period. And so this is just to clean up the MOU and keep it up to date. So that's really it. And I just wanted to thank Paul and Liz for their expertise on representing the district interests, and the union and union stewards for respectful deliberations and fair dealing, and the board for their thoughtful deliberation and responsible decisions. And I really think this is a fair and defensible agreement for all parties. Any questions or comments before I present the proposed board action?
No, just to echo, great work with everyone involved.
Absolutely, and I mean, you should know as a board that your general manager did a terrific job for his first time negotiating labor agreements.
I forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the requested board action, approved union memorandum of understanding for the term of June 24, 2021 through June 19, 2024.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Director Sepple, how would you like to vote on this item?
Yes.
Thank you. And that motion passes unanimous with Director Peterson recusing himself.
Okay. 6F, Management Staff MOU.
Now we have the management MOU. This action again is to approve the management MOU agreement, really with the same terms as the union agreement, 3-year agreement with 2.5% cost of living each year, and that salary survey provision in that final year. We also have some edits and changes that include a severance agreement and the elimination of a disability clause. And I think I echo the board's sentiments in that we really appreciated the managers group approach on these negotiations, and especially during the COVID times and the local economic uncertainty, especially a few months ago, 3 or 4 months ago when our negotiations started. So appreciate that. And again, I think this is a fair and defensible agreement for all parties. Any questions, comments?
Good job all around. both sides. Good work.
Worked out well, thank you. So the requested board action is to approve management memorandum of understanding for the term of June 24, 2021 through June 19, 2024.
So moved.
Sorry, I didn't catch the second.
I'll
Is that
second.
Ronco? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Director Stefan, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous with Director Peterson recusing himself. And I will let him back in.
He wasn't in there very long.
Okay, we're ready for you, David. Yep, we're ready.
I had to get some too.
Welcome in. That brings us to item 6G, and I will move approval of payment of claims in the amount of $987,369.20.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Director Stefan, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
You? And that motion passes unanimous.
And we now have standing and ad hoc committee and liaison reports.
Start.
We had a solar ad hoc committee meeting last week. Very positive. I see that's further on the agenda, so I don't want to step on anything, John. I'll just kind of keep like one of my personal points because I think you're getting more detail. But really, again, just kudos to staff, both for getting, questions asked by Dan and I throughout the process, but, other members of the board, and really diving into that, specifically the research into other areas that were utilizing solar in the basin and how successful they were, and not even accounting for the new technologies we're using. And then, of course, Gary's work, diving into the legal kind of realm. So kind of leave the details for when John speaks, but again, just good work for staff, kind of, going through everything and, numbers still look positive or really positive. And so, yeah, very positive meeting.
Monday we had the operations committee meeting, good meeting. Really the main agenda item was a presentation about a condition assessment using artificial intelligence technologies, and it's been used to evaluate the water system to date. The intent is to move it over and evaluate the sewer system as well, but the idea is to try and use the AI to try and predict where breaks are going to happen so they can be anticipated and try to anticipate those things and repair them before they break. So anyways, very interesting presentation. It did tease a question out of me that I think is something I'd like for the staff to maybe work on, and that it relates to the urban water management plan that we just talked about. The unaccounted for water is a pretty high number. It's about 15% of our total water production, and it would be nice to know where that is. Is 50% of it fire hydrant water and 50% of it leaks, or is it all leaks? And I think this type of AI condition assessment and the other project that I guess we're going to get a report on at some point, where they're doing the remote sensing from using aerial methods to seek out leaks and whatnot. So it would be good to try and characterize that overall leakage number and try to break it down a little bit, just so we understand where it's going. So, anyway. And then yesterday we had the ECC, and I don't know what that
stands for employee something.
Communication committee?
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, and, that was very brief for me. I had another meeting I had to get to, so I gave about a 5-minute presentation, basically on, my priorities as a board member, and then my impressions on the district today as a new board member. So, they were pretty well attended. It seemed like the Zoom screen was full of names and faces, so,
Just about 50. Yeah, it was a good crowd for you.
Oh,
I brought them out.
I didn't see you lighters, though.
Yeah.
But anyway. Cell phones, yeah. So, anyway, I had to hang up and get to my other meeting, so hopefully it went well, and that's my report. Let me just, while I've got the podium, I'll take the El Dorado Water Agency. They had a meeting on the 9th, that was last Wednesday, but I had to miss that for a doctor's appointment. The, agenda item there was a budget hearing, so we have evaluated that budget before and recommended some changes to the staffing and whatnot, so I don't know, John, if, when that thing gets over to you, maybe you can fill in the blanks on that.
Okay, yeah, there really is no changes from the previous presentation on the budget. And there's a good amount of money in there for the district, or slated for the district, $160,000 for our groundwater management plan, and up to $200,000 for our cost share projects, yet to be determined.
Thank you.
Okay. So, the Organizational Structure, Service, and Efficiency Ad Hoc Committee, quite a mouthful there, met on Tuesday. So, and that is John, Chris Apaloo, and myself. And we just discussed some potential updates to the board policy manual and some staffing ideas that John brought forward. So not really a lot to report there, but we did meet, and it was a good meeting.
Yeah, I can probably add to some of the staffing ideas. One is to convert our operator and training position, an operator position, to kind of that first level operator called Operator 1. The operator and training position is a 2,000-hour position. You train someone, and then they leave, and then you start over. They leave, you start over. And during COVID, we really found that we needed more resources there. And actually, we've been short a position there ever since our last reorganization some 10, 12 years ago. And they can really use the expertise. And I think, I'm working with Jeff and Paul right now. We're looking at the numbers, I think, just from a pay and benefits and overtime standpoint. I think this change will pay for itself. But it brings a lot of other benefits, still quantifying those, and then I'll bring that forward, hopefully next month if the numbers look good. And then I'm also looking at, and this kind of gets to Dave's point, and actually probably everybody's point, about our asset management program and our water loss. And we've talked about the need perhaps for some additional staffing resources to, especially for our water asset management program. So, talk about some ideas there, and again, we'll bring that forward to the full board when that's more prepared.
I guess, yeah, Nick and Dave covered kind of the solar ad hoc as well as the operations. I guess just, I'm not sure what you're gonna cover as part of your solar item, but yeah, so just a high level, it sounds like we're getting close on the power purchase agreement, down to the fine details. I'm looking at about 5-6 weeks out on getting that nailed down, right, Gary? And then, yeah, there's just still kind of fleshing out some of the fine details related to the financial analysis. We discussed a little bit about some of the considerations, some of the things to think about now, to get this thing moved forward for permitting through TRPA and CEQA, et cetera. And then, looking at about an August board meeting to bring the project forward. So, did I get that correct?
Yeah.
Just to give you guys a sense.
We'll look at August. Things work out.
Yeah, and then just to echo Dave's recognition of Steve's presentation on the AI, Baseform AI, on really looking at the probability of failure of our water system, And forthcoming is, of course, the remote sensing kind of analysis to help kind of refine where there might be leaks in the system. And I guess for me, soon to come is more of a kind of an assessment of the consequences if these pipes fail. Then what? How many people are out of service? What are the environmental impacts? That kind of thing. I think that's going to be a very interesting aspect of it. And then also maybe to bring to light, Julie talked through, I thought this was being one of the more major items, the Sierra track flushing, and that when you look at some of the risk assessment, there's some vulnerabilities there, it looks like. And so if we can get ahead of that and just either making sure we have sufficient staff on board, ready to go in case something does happen, or, getting that neighborhood, that community kind of, build some awareness around what's going on there and what might happen, what to do after the fact and all that kind of stuff.
I have a leak or two spring up.
Yeah.
Or that, or just, when you get the water back flowing again, how to deal with it, some of the cloudiness or whatever. But anyways, it was the opportunity was very thorough as always. It was good on detail and appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have a board member report? Other than what we just all said?
Chris,
Chris, are you there?
Asking for me?
Yeah, did you have anything?
I have no, I don't, thanks.
Okay. And we touched on the El Dorado County Water Agency, so that brings us to John, again, General Manager report.
Okay, thanks. Actually, I thought of a couple more things maybe in regards to El Dorado County Water, the water agency. And one is that they plan to add some additional staffing. They're an engineer and engineering assistant, and we're hoping to utilize some of those resources as well. And secondly, on the ARPA, the COVID relief funding, working with Ken to work with the county to help get some funds for the district. So, moving on to general manager report, I just have a real quick staffing update. In underground repair sewer, we are completing an in-house recruitment for the lead position. This was Heidi's old position, and those interviews are next week. COVID-19, no COVID sickness. We have one employee out right now with symptoms, flu-type symptoms, so they're working at home. So it just went out as a precaution right now. OSHA is meeting today. We're really waiting on OSHA in regards to masks and other COVID guidelines for the workplace. The latest word is that if you're vaccinated, you will not need to wear a mask. And I believe that's anywhere, even indoors in the workplace. If you're not vaccinated, you should wear a mask, and we intend for that to be a self-certification process. We're not going to ask or require any documentation. It'll be a self-attest. So I think that's what OSHA is putting in place. Whatever they put in place will follow as a workplace. And, goes without saying, we're all looking forward to probably getting our masks off, back to normal, getting everybody back to the workplace, even better than before. So, I mentioned ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, the COVID relief funding, and we continue to work with the CSDA, the California Special Districts Association. We're trying to get funding directly from the state. And actually, we've seen some success in this so far. The legislator in the proposed budget that's going to the governor has $100 million in there for special districts for COVID relief funding. We continue to kind of make our case with the governor's office. That is somewhat, I heard, pushing back on that a little bit. So continue to work with the governor's office in Sacramento, hopefully get that direct funding. And I think regardless, we'll probably still be working with our local city and county for some COVID relief funding. There's about $4+ million coming to the city, and I believe that the number is $34 million coming to El Dorado County. So, Chris Kelly is here. Do you have some thoughts on our meeting system here?
Good afternoon. I just thought I heard through watching the meeting last week or last couple weeks ago that you guys were talking about whether or not you wanted to renew the GoToWebinar functionality that we have set up in place right now. So a quick history on where we came from. About 6 years ago is when we first acquired our first GoToMeeting license. And then we were using that pretty regularly, primarily with engineering to meet their needs. And then in late 2019, early 2020, COVID hit. That scattered everybody out of the offices. And we started using GoToMeeting to run the board meetings because we already had the license, we had the functionality there. We were able to just start running it off of a couple laptops over here. So as more people went to online meetings, there was a risk of somebody bombing the meeting, right? Where GoToMeeting allows anybody in the meeting to talk whenever they want, however they want. GoToWebinar was different in the sense that we had more control over who could talk when. So looking at that risk, we said, okay, let's get ahead of this because other agencies that we collaborate with, they had already had issues in their council meetings and stuff. So we opted to go ahead and get the GoToWebinar licensing because it was a familiar interface for us, right? Made by the same company, it offers a lot of the same functionality, plus more reporting. You had to register for the meeting, so we got a better accurate attendance record, and then the audio controls. So going forward now, the recommendation from IT would be to go back to the pre-COVID meeting structure where we record the meeting as it happens and then within 24 hours post it up to YouTube. The reason for that is we have more staff coming back into the office and it's taking up more IT resources to support those staff now that they're in the office again. So with that, I'll open it up for conversation, but we are looking at other alternatives for engineering as well. So as you guys know, we're migrating up to Office 365. That comes with Microsoft Teams, which does have a webinar function in February this year. So that's already included in our licensing. So I did go ahead and renew the GoToWebinar license this year when I bundled it with our GoToMeeting license and our other remote access tool, and removed one of the features of the GoToWebinar that we had signed up for. It brought that cost down to about $1,500 for the year. So we have it now for another year, but it gives us time to transition off this platform and pay for other tools. So.
Okay, yeah, I think the last number I heard was maybe 6,000. So that's way better.
Yep.
That's like it's worth it.
Yeah.
So how many platforms? You have Teams, you have GoTo, and you have Zoom?
Yeah. Teams, GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, and Zoom. Yeah. We'll probably look at dropping all of those once we get on that.
My next question was why?
Well, with GoToMeeting, we only had a license to run one meeting at a time. And so sometimes we would hit that contention where we had more than one meeting going on at the same time. So that's what the Zoom license is for.
All right.
And you said the MS Teams, Teams
Yeah.
will have some of the same functionality as the webinar.
Where you can register for the meeting.
Okay, so we can have like attendance lessons and see, were they actually there or did they just register and nobody ever showed up?
Right. And it's all self-service stuff too.
Okay.
You get our Teams out. So.
Yeah, so that'll satisfy engineering needs if we decide to stick with allowing virtual attendance at mandatory pre-bid.
Sure.
Yeah.
The board has had IT explore the possibility of streaming meetings live in the past, and we're open to looking at that again, but probably in a more organized fashion. The way that we're set up now, the board system was never designed to stream meetings live. So we're sort of putting a Band-Aid on a situation just to help get it out there and available and stuff. So, but it's definitely not sustainable in the long run. So.
Is Google Meet an option for the district or?
It's not as controllable as like the Microsoft Teams outlet is because we have all the administrative backend because we licensed Microsoft Office. We would have to license a Google Workspace account to do that and then offer everybody licenses to that. So it would just be a little redundant, I think. But, yeah.
Any questions for Chris?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, finish up with fire hydrants, talk about fire hydrants. So we have about 2,000 fire hydrants in our entire district system. We've installed about 200 of these in recent years. We've had a hydrants only project and also through our water line improvement projects. So 200 about out of 2,000. The remainder really have been somewhat unattended over the years, especially in the last 8 years or so when the fire departments kind of stopped providing staff to flush the hydrants to a large degree. Prior to that, we had flushed hydrants, but we didn't know what hydrants or when or how often. It really has not been managed at all. So, given this, I'm just concerned that there may be hydrants out there that will not work when they need to be turned on for a fire, or they will break when you try to open them because they're old and haven't been exercised or maintained, or they might be leaking if you open them up. So I just think we have to kind of get out there as soon as possible, check every hydrant, and put each hydrant in an ongoing, well-managed, asset management, GIS-based maintenance schedule. I mean, that's how you do asset management, and we need to do it for hydrants. So I'm setting this hydrant program as the top priority right now. We need to check every hydrant, I think, in the next 4 to 6 months, complete an inventory, a condition assessment, and we've already set this up using a field tablet and laserfish forms and a data collection tool in the field, identify hydrants for maintenance, immediately repair hydrants or replace non-functioning hydrants, and we've already started doing this in the fear track, kind of in advance of this flushing project. We do plan to engage the fire departments or the fire academy for possible assistance with this effort. But right now, we're taking the lead. These are our assets. We spent a lot to install them. They're very expensive to replace. And of course, they're critical. We need to maintain our hydrants and do all we can to make sure they will work when needed. And I'm working with our staff on ways to resource this effort internally. And actually, we're also working with fire departments on an adopt a hydrant program where homeowners might adopt a hydrant and keep the snow removed in the winter, and so that just kind of help that snow removal effort. So, any thoughts, comments on hydrants?
I'd say thank you for taking action on that. I think it's important. I think this fire season is going to be pretty significant, so whatever we can do, although wildfire has come through, there's maybe not much you can do, but fire will be helpful. Thank you.
Hey, John, I have one comment. That's a great idea, but what I was thinking is, why wouldn't you start on your perimeter of where the wildfires could work their way into town, and then just create an inspection process that's like concentric circles, smaller to the middle? Start with the outside ones first.
Yeah, I think that's, I guess we haven't totally figured out who we have to do this work and how we might progress with that work. I think, starting at the WUI and working our way in is not a bad idea. Yeah, we'll look into that.
I think that's a good suggestion. I actually really like the adopt the fire hydrant suggestion as well. I think you're going to get some participants to jump into it. Maybe can we get a little plaque on fire hydrant, something like that. Get more people involved. But no, I share Shane's concerns. I was going to what I think to be the last Wednesday, just in the time I was driving from my house in Tahoe to what I believe to be the only bar on the South Shore that you can still get around to drink, steamers. So thank you very much, Kelly. Right, and they looked at me like I was crazy. Of course you can get around. I said, thank you very much. But in all seriousness, in that 5-minute drive, my phone beeped once. There's a fire on the West Shore, based on the down power line. Before I get to steamers, my phone beeps again. There's a fire down in Jacks Valley in the basin. It's going to be very serious, and so I support your efforts, John, and anything we can do to encourage that is fascinating.
You heard the sirens all day long, you just cringe. I mean, it's just,
yeah.
And it wasn't there when it Sugar Pond too? And that, you saw the smoke, and it was just, it's very stressful.
Feeling it. And Dave, thanks for, I think Dave recommended that about the hydrant program earlier this year and all, so thanks for that.
Sure, if you do put people's names on it, put it above Labrador level.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
No, that's not what you do. If you do it enough, you're below the Labrador level. If you do it enough, you're above.
Actually, I was gonna suggest, why don't you have, their dogs have gone for what?
My thoughts on it.
Even more authority.
It's like acknowledge that, Shelley's husband and I kind of maintain the fire hydrant officially across from our house.
Below the Labrador.
You're not possible. Okay, solar project, one more time. Yeah, a little more detail to add. Thanks for the update so far. Of course, staff continuing to work with our AD-HOC committee on the development of a 1 megawatt project we're looking at on about 3 acres. It's just east of our lower shops. And we expect that this facility will be designed, built, and financed externally. We're working with the Core, ProStar, SSI group. SSI is their finance arm. And the district will agree to purchase power at a set rate for the next 20 or 25 years. We're still working on those numbers. And at a rate lower than the Liberty rate right now, and increasing less, I think certainly less than future Liberty rate increases. So kind of this thought process, no out-of-pocket money for the district, lower energy rates for 25 years, or 20. And it looks like significant savings right out of the gates, perhaps as much as $100,000 in energy cost savings in the first year alone, and then going up from there. So it looks very promising. Still some hoops to jump through, permitting, the power purchase agreements. And so it really looks like it'll really definitely work from a financial and energy savings perspective. And we just want to make sure that we address all of the board's concerns on this project. And so we continue to address operational issues, for example, making sure that we have checked and effectively addressed installation performance and maintenance in snow country. And how this system perform, will it perform as promised, and what happens if it doesn't? And what happens if this group, the finance group, SSI, or whoever goes out of business, what happens then? And what are the district options in that situation? And I think this basically encompasses kind of the questions, concerns I've heard from the board so far. If you have other concerns, I mean, I think now or later or any time, bring them forward so we can do the research, do the work, and look for solutions and bring answers back to you. And as Shane mentioned, I think at this point, it looks like we're lined up to be back in front of the full board in August to have a decision point. So that's, anything else from the board?
No, I guess for you really hit the nail on the head with this, let's get out any kind of concerns, questions you might have, any additional research you want staff to dig into ahead of this meeting. We definitely want to get those questions answered. That goes for the public. So if there's, anything that we should anticipate, please communicate to John or the AD-HOC committee, because we're totally open and.
So make sure we do everything we can, and
Yeah.
check everything we can.
Yeah, I think the questions that you went through, it sounded like you captured my issues certainly, so, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing the report on those things.
Looking good, looking really good. Thanks, Kelly.
Real quick, John, I was just going to say, just because it's related to this, we were just notified by our Liberty Rate Intervention Consultant, Jeff Inge.
Is that right?
Liberty has submitted another rate increase request to the CPUC that would be effective January 22 to the A33 customer class, which is us and the other large members. That if the CPUC actually allowed it as presented, it could potentially increase our rates another 27%.
Wow.
And as a reference, I think we're looking at a 2% annual increase on our power purchase agreement with the solar deal, so.
Like, just one of the things that the Liberty's operating procedures on board, the question is, as the line runs along the West Shore before it gets us, and the fire line, looks to bend last week, Liberty line, what's their cost gonna be if they have to underline that and change that entire system running into northern Nevada and someplace southern Nevada? Like, I mean, look at the infrastructure woes and costs we have here from, just Lord. So, I think the increases are gonna be much more dramatic than that 2%, just given kind of the realities they face.
Yeah, and hardening like that has not been something they have brought up when they have told us about what the capital improvements are that, they're anticipating that's resulting in some of these rate increases.
Yeah, they did use that as the excuse, though, fire prevention expenditures.
Well, no, I think that was I was on a call a while back, and what that troubled me was just that it would be as if we, as this board, did not have kind of the wherewithal or discussion about kind of our aging system. If we never talked about that, that would be very concerning, Board One, and they're not talking about it, and so that is troubling to me as well.
Maybe just a couple other comments. For the meeting, I think the first one in August, when you're going to bring this forward, you'll see, a fairly extensive presentation from CoStar and Core on what they're doing. You're going to see more information, a lot updated and current information on the financials, both with what we're anticipating from Liberty, but also what they're looking at construction costs, because I think as everybody knows, the increases in construction are through the roof right now. In our meeting we just had with Core and ProStar this afternoon, they're aware of that, and they're working fairly aggressively with all of their vendors, trying to hold down costs to bring the project in, somewhere as close where they initially anticipated it. I was comforted somewhat with their approach and what they're doing to make this happen within somewhere as close to where we thought the original savings were going to be between the Liberty's costs and the PPA costs. But feel pretty good about how the meeting went this afternoon. And then you'll also get a summary of the key points in the power purchase agreement. And I know that there have been questions raised from various board members about how we deal with certain things, and we'll try to summarize those in a PowerPoint that you won't have to read the 75-page power purchase agreement itself. So we'll try to get those key points so you understand how we're dealing with various things in the agreement. You want to add anything about the meeting today?
No, I think, I think it's important to bring to everybody's attention that the finances may not look the same as they did in February, just because of the volatility of the construction market right now and availability of solar panels and everything else. But we've made it clear to them what our priorities are, that, we don't want to skimp on the system and have them install a lesser product that is maybe not going to perform as well as what we've been talking about all along. Stick with the high quality panels, the bifacial panels, announce that get it off the ground because we're in snow country, and tell us what that costs, so that we know what we're getting into.
Yeah, and on that point, the power purchase agreement has an exhibit that spells out the quality of all the various components of the system, as well as maintenance requirements. And that's been reviewed by the district's consultant, HDR, and they provided input to us all through this process. So what Julie's describing, we can make sure that they're just not telling us, we're saying this is what the quality has to be, and you can't install anything lesser than what's described in that exhibit.
Glad you're on our side, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. That's all I have.
Anybody else, any other staff or attorney report?
Gary has a report.
We had one, but unfortunately Dave will have to leave.
Oh, yeah. What could it be?
You gotta have the sandwich back there.
Yeah.
This is on the,
Deals with Tahoe.
memo on the Tahoe Keys options.
I guess I just want to comment on the solar ad hoc and just add that out. Just hoping Paul can engage on the finance analysis as we move forward. I'm sure you probably already are, but just want to make sure you're comfortable with everything that comes forward as well.
Okay.
He's guaranteeing it.
So we are having presentations from Gary?
Not a presentation, but it's a short update.
I guess that would be our final
Yeah.
item of the day.
You know, you see this past in future meetings, and Dave probably doesn't have to go back into
Yeah, I guess for the meeting. This is the last item.
So is that yours? Are you on the meeting, right?
We're riding around after that. Good.
We're good?
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Before Dave leaves, I was gonna note I'm gonna be gone, the next board meeting. I was supposed to be available by phone, but there's some change in the flight. Just in case Chris, isn't gonna be here or whatnot, or there's a voting action. I could vote later on in the meeting, kind of based on the change flight, or plane flight change. Just wanted to mention that now, before you left.
I think Chris may be missing the next meeting. I don't quite recall.
We'll check on it. I thought that's what he mentioned.
Well,
Thank you, Dan.
I'll probably actually be calling in again. I think plans are changed. I was going to be back in Indiana, but now I might be in California, but I'm going to be here for a funeral. So I'll still be able to call in on the first, one way or the other.
Great, thanks, Chris.
Okay, Gary?
I will also be out of town. That's the first? I can call in.
You can call in?
Yeah.
That would be great, because if we have any technical difficulties, we could run no forum. So
Yeah, pretty close.
Just give me what I need, and I'll try to make you.
Okay, I understand, some information was distributed to the board just for background information, I know, by John, so that you had a little bit of information about how we're kind of approaching working with the Tahoe Keys and what they've requested of the district. And the idea here is to not go into that in a lot of detail, but at least so if the public either is listening or listens later on or looks at the minutes, they can understand that a little bit more information as to how things are progressing. And, we're still at the initial steps of providing assistance to Tahoe Keys. And we're, at least from my perspective, the district's approaching this from the standpoint of you've got a portion of your community that is in potentially a very serious situation. And while the district isn't obligated to do anything, like, at least from my perspective, the district is doing what it does in other situations where things in the community need to be provide assistance to the extent you can help, whether it's, like workforce housing and other things you've done, is to lend a hand, but to do it in a way that's equitable and doesn't adversely impact your customers now, but is also fair to whoever you're providing assistance to. With that said, the Keys has requested, I think, as you know, two options to provide assistance. One is a water supply agreement, and one is potentially an acquisition of assets from Keys, and just basically take over their water system and operate it, and Keys customers become district customers. And so, in looking at kind of the picture, what would need to be done for each of those, we've identified for the water supply option that there probably would not be any regulatory approvals because the Keys is totally within your current service area. There wouldn't be a requirement to another regulatory agency to get approval from. But there would be needed to do some due diligence to understand how much water Keys is going to request from the district, and then how can the district provide that to them, which is going to take a look at what improvements and changes need to be done to the district system to provide whatever flows they want, and the cost of that. And then if there's improvements on the Tahoe Keys side, that would something they need to evaluate in order to accept the water. There would also be, based on that information, that we would anticipate using a rate consultant to develop a rate for that, taking into account the cost of providing that water service, which would include cost of improvements to the district system. And it could be, and that rate could include that unless the Tahoe Keys wanted to fund it up front. If they paid for the improvements up front, the rate's going to be less. If they want to spread it over time through the rate, then that their rate would be slightly higher, whatever cost it's going to be to take that. Basically, to keep the district whole. There would also be a capacity charge. Unlike under the mutual aid agreement, we agree to provide, the district agrees to provide on a short-term basis. And so they're not becoming a permanent customer of the district. Under the water supply agreement, they essentially becoming a customer of the district and would have to pay a capacity charge to connect up to the district system. And the district has those capacity charges already in its administrative code, and that would just be a requirement. So that's kind of the framework for if the district provided water on a long-term basis under a water supply agreement. And we could do it under an agreement itself, or we could develop a new customer class for the Key and have them just be underneath that, under your administrative code for that type of water service. So there's a couple different things, and this is continuing to evolve as we look into this, what these options, what the requirements would be. So is there any questions on that part?
No, but you do bring up, brought up capacity charges, and going back to Paul's item on the analysis that HDR is going to conduct, is that, sounds like it might be out of the scope, or anticipating some kind of change, or is that maybe in the midst of the study that they're doing, just maybe trying to anticipate what those capacity charges might look like?
It all depends on the timing. Because I said it would take probably about 6 months to complete those. But we probably will have some sort of an idea, maybe what they might look like, or the structure midway, 3/4 of the way through. So yeah, I can't really say what that'll be. I mean, right now we do have set capacity charges for every different water line connection size. And so yeah, they would pay what we have in the books right now for an 8-inch connection, which is the intertie size.
Yeah, and if it's larger, you've got capacity charges for those as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if HDR can maybe explore that a little bit. I don't know if that's something that, you had mentioned something about adjusting their capacity charges as part of this It's maybe annexation of Tahoe Keys, or, I mean, I don't know, if that's something in the scope or outside of the scope for HDR to look at, or maybe we can amend scope to maybe include some of that information.
Well, we wouldn't
Would be
have to do that because whatever the result is coming out of the capacity charges will apply to them as it will to every other customer.
The way I'm hearing Gary characterize it, more of like a special rate zone.
Yeah, that would be for the actual service charge rates, not the capacity rate, which would be their buy-in to the system. The service charge is just their ongoing quarterly charges like you pay. And so, yeah, that's what we would have to have the additional rate study done for.
We can't have special capacity charges for them.
I'm not aware of any.
I guess that's what I was encouraging you to maybe look into as part of it.
We can do that.
So within this special rate district, you know, as you look at the map, you could fundamentally look at the quality of all the water system within the Keys, understand where and how it needs to be brought up to snuff, and then assign that cost within a period of time within the special rate case that is separate than all the rest of the South Shore?
I think you're mixing the two options together a little bit.
No, I guess what I'm saying is like, for the special rate, no, actually, please go ahead.
Because under the water supply agreement, any improvements, we wouldn't have any responsibility for Keys water system. We would supply water to the connection.
Right.
And any costs on their side to take that water or any improvement, we just supply the water.
No, I was thinking more if we took it over.
I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, you were jumping in.
Jump the gun, man. I was excited. We got people back.
But, I mean, just to expand a little bit on what you were saying, if we had to do improvements on our side to supply them the water that they're requesting, according to the agreement, then yes, they would have to pay for that, and they could have a rate that's different from the rest of the South Shore.
To cover that cost?
Yeah.
How far downstream could that be? Just throwing that out. You know what I'm saying? Like, where does that end as a downstream method?
I think that will be part of the engineering evaluation that the consultant that's going to be hired will tell you. And we need to know from Keys, how much water do they want? And then the consultant working with Julie's staff can then determine what are the various improvements that need to be made in the system. And then that can be presented for discussion to Tahoe Keys to say, if you want this quantity, it's going to be this much, so these things need to be done. If you want more, these other things need to be done. And, I think there's some balancing too. Are these things that are solely needed as a result of the Keys request for water service, water supply, or are these other things that should be a blending and blurring between some of those lines, I think.
Right.
But the idea is if the district wasn't going to do those costs, improve those improvements now, and resulting as the request from the request to Tahoe Keys, that's probably something they need to pay for.
I agree.
Hey, here's it, Mark, going over there, working, or maybe can you pull it closer?
It works if it's turned on.
Details. The CFO picked that up.
So the other option that they've asked us to look at is the acquisition of their assets to the point where the district would take over all of their assets and supply water to their customers, which they would become customers of the district, and the Keys Water Company would basically disappear. Since they're totally encompassed within the district service area, we don't think from the LAFCO that there's any process that we need to go through with LAFCO, but we would want to explore that with them, at least as far as maybe updating their information as to who the district's serving. But right now, we don't think there would be any approval process through LAFCO. But we will, if this option proves out to be, what the preferred option by the Keys and the district, I think we'd spend some time to talk to LAFCO just to make sure. There would have to be made some changes in your, permit from the Department of Drinking Water because you're gonna be supplying that area now directly. But I don't think that's a significant issue. Under CEQA, you probably have categorical exemptions because those facilities are already in place. We had just done a, somewhat similar situation. We represent the city of San Juan Capistrano. They decided they didn't want to be in the water business anymore, and it was taken over by, all the assets were taken over by Santa Margarita Water District. And that was a much larger acquisition, but under that arrangement, we looked into and finished, and actually just accomplished, although the secret work was all under different, 2 or 3 different exemptions. So there wasn't a big CEQA cost and effort moving forward. On the water rights side, Keys is all on groundwater right now. So they are what they call an appropriator, and we would just step in the shoes. There's no other filings or anything else. The state board doesn't have any jurisdiction over groundwater, so really not much to do there. There's Keys holds well permits, but again, those are already in place. There's nothing new that needs to be done in that area. Where we see most effort being done is to develop the rates for water service to those Keys customers, because there's a couple different things going on. As with the water supply option agreement, there's what improvements need to be done to the district system to bring water into the Keys, and also what improvements need to be done to the Keys system to bring it up on reasonably close on par as far as quality with the district system. So your customers aren't paying to make the improvements to their system. And so, and there's one other component. There is the Key system will all need to be metered, because right now, due to their size, they're not required to be metered, but obviously once the district requires them, they have to be metered. And the question is how that's funded. And so there's a couple different approaches we've thought about. One is that the Keys would, the Keys customers would become district customers, and they pay the same rate as the current district customers. On top of that would be to set up a improvement zone for a supplemental rate on top of that. And that supplemental rate would be based on the various improvements that need to be made to both systems to serve the Keys area. Under that scenario, we think, but we haven't, again, this is very preliminary, we think that the installation of water meters would be funded by the district, because the Keys customers in their rate, from their standard rate, district rate, they would be paying for also the part of the installation of meters the district has been doing that hasn't been paid off. And some of these have been paid up for a few years, some have just started being paid off, and then, so that would be melted into that cost. The other option we thought about in talking with John and Paul is developing an entirely separate rate for the Keys to pay for all the improvements, just as the other option, but then the Keys would pay, those customers would pay for their own meters. But from that rate, the Keys customers aren't then paying for any portion of the rates that go to the cost of district having installed meters on its customers. So that would be more, keeping it a little bit more separate. And I think again, very preliminary, I think this comes out pretty close to the same way. I think it's maybe a matter of the perception and how you explain things. You may want to explain things to the public as to which way you want to go. But again, it's trying to be fair and equitable cost of service to both your existing customers and to the Keys customers who become district customers. And keeping it so that one isn't subsidizing the other.
Gary, can I interrupt for 1 second? I mean, I appreciate your infinite display of possible outcomes for this, but at this point, this is an exploration, and we don't have the variables that we need to make even an equation that we can understand. So, I mean, I get it, right? There's a lot of different things that could happen. I'd see it a little differently, because if I have a gas station and I buy an older gas station that's needs improvement, I pay less for the gas station, but I don't double the price of the gas. So, I mean, that's an argument for down the road, way down the road, because we're not even there yet. We don't know what they want. We don't even know if they want to be part of the district or if they don't. So, I mean, if we find these things out and we get more information with the costs associated with one option or the other, then we can make those decisions. And like I said, I do appreciate knowing all that stuff, but it's unimportant at this point, because we just need to know how much whether or not they want to be part of our system. And if they are, then they're we, not you and us. You know, I mean, at that point, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, but Chris, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's way down. This is very preliminary, and this information is being developed and obviously discussed with district board first to get input from you. But the idea what the Keys has asked us is to provide, what does this potentially look like from a very schematic level? And that's just where we're at right now. There's no meat on the bones. It's just, these are the concepts. This is what we think it looks like, so that they can, and you can make informed decisions on how you might want to move forward in the future. But we're not anywhere close to that, because like you said, until they get a chance to look at these options, in addition to whatever else they're doing to study their options on their side, we won't know what to do. And the idea is, at least from the legal perspective, is this is all we're doing at this point until we get some idea of what sort of proposal, which road they want to take downstream, but also at least the district then can react to that as to whatever they do request, if that's something you really want to do or not.
Sorry, I did have a question, not to get too far into the weeds, but through the servicing agreement, we would have a capacity charge based on the line we're connecting to the Keys, right?
Correct.
So would that line then be metered as well? Because where I'm going with this is, well, I'll just leave it there first.
It is metered.
So it will be metered.
It is metered.
Okay.
Yeah.
We already have a meter there.
Right, but I'm trying to figure out how, so each of our customers had to pay the cost to get with it, to enter the system, and then they're now metered individually, right? So I want to make sure that same system applies to folks with Keys, meaning that you're not just paying to join the system, everyone also is existing within the same limitations. Because if we don't hit that threshold, then I would say we are not equitable, right? And so if it doesn't do both of those, but I have to do it, and folks in this room have to do it, that doesn't seem equitable.
No, everyone's treated the same.
You see what I'm saying? But how are you judging the metered rate of an individual customer? So it's just the
I think you're getting too far into the weeds.
But we're going to have these conversations, and I think like these will be initial kind of key points as you go forward. Because like how you structure that initial kind of keys will be very instrumental in other things. And so I guess what I'm saying is, so the keys will be, how would the metered rate of the keys work?
You mean to the keys itself, under the water supply option, or are you talking about?
Well, no, for the water supply option, because I assume regardless of if we took over the system, regardless of how the meters were installed, to some degree is irrelevant. You know, that becomes a financial matter and a legal and matter. But what I'm saying is, if you have one meter at the keys, how does that equate to the person that has a meter at their house?
If the water, they're totally two separate, different scenarios.
No, what I'm saying is, right, I'm taking your theoretical person in Tahoe, me, right? I'm under a meter, my single home.
Mm-hmm.
If we provide water to the entirety of the keys, those people's single homes are not metered.
No, but we're not supplying it to them. If, under the water supply arrangement, we're supplying it, the purchaser is the Tahoe Keys Water Company.
Right.
Not the individual.
That's what I'm saying to you.
I think what you're asking, Nick, so I can clarify that a little bit. We had a couple of those come up when we were doing the meters, like some of the neighborhoods that have like one water line going in and a bunch of homeowners. The one on the end of the keys there, I forget what it's called, but the problem would have been they would have all had to just split up the cost of water. So you could use a ton of water. Your neighbor could be not there 6 months of the year, and then they have to figure out how to do that. So, I mean, the options come up. You put in your own meter, figure out what you're using. You just split the cost evenly, and everybody just sucks it up. I mean, those are all questions that we don't know the answer to because we don't even know what they want.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, again, the same restrictions beholden to someone in the district now, if we're providing them water and they're using the entirety of our system. I'm just trying to, do you see where I'm going with this as a question?
Yeah,
I do.
So.
I think we should do that research, but I don't think we're at that point, right? We don't even
No,
know.
but I just want to make sure this point's clear, right, that if we're providing the water and we're just metering at that hose, right?
Yeah.
That's a much different situation than everyone else in the service area today, right? And what I'm saying too is difference and equity, those are conflicting ideas. And so we've clearly created a different system within the keys. They're going to be charged differently and whatnot. And so when someone asks me in the community, well, okay, we're being metered at our home, keys are not, you're providing them water, they have expensive turf. And what is my answer to that individual?
What the arrangement would probably look like is the keys would say we want 500 up to 500 gallons a minute and not to exceed X acre feet per month or year on some arrangement. And so that would be the limit as to the zip line this is supply. As part of that arrangement, if you wanted, it's depending on whether you want to do it under your administrative code and create a new class, like the class of 1, or if you want to just have a water supply agreement, you could make their use of that portion of the water you're supplying subject to your conservation requirements.
Would be that meet what I guess we're like as a model, you would have kind of your baseline rate for a single family residence in South Lake. You could utilize that as, you know, from your kind of your tier classes, you know, as you use more water, that could be your baseline. So, you know, you have 1,000 houses at the keys, each using 1,000 gallons of water, keep them as simple, right? That's your baseline, and then the price goes up or down, or it would just be capped.
That's probably a little bit.
Yeah, I'll leave it alone. Sorry, I could go forever. Yeah,
it's probably a little bit inequitable because the cost to take care of one connection versus 1,000 connections is a lot different. To aggregate 1,000 in the city, that's the limit.
No, not
the base.
Right. What I'm saying is, but again, me as a single family homeowner, if I use above a threshold of water, I have to pay more today, right? And so what I'm saying is that baseline is constant for every homeowner in the district today. What I'm saying is that could be, if you use that same baseline, you could extrapolate that to every single family residence in the keys, plus commercial interest and so forth and so on, and that could be your baseline. And then you create a tiered system, so to Chris's point, you get out of their business, but you create the same equitable kind of distribution based on the model, but you just multiplied it by the sum the residential units, commercial units, and so forth.
That's certainly something you could build into the agreement, is to say, you're saying you want up to this quantity of water, let's say 500 gallons per minute max. And you build a connection to be able to do that. But you say, if you take over X acre feet, then you're gonna jump, your price is gonna jump.
Yeah, because I mean, I think you could do that without getting in their, again, just simple term, getting in their business. That would have kind of, I guess, assuaged my concerns in trying to create a more equitable system. So again, you know, kind of to Chris's point, but if we kind of look at it in that manner, I think that helps me at least.
Yeah, no, I think you can certainly build that in.
Okay, thank you.
That is.
So there will be a lot more to come. It'll be interesting to see where this goes, because, you know, I think where the footing, the road hits the rubber, rubber hits the road, you know, the engineering work and what the Keys really want, who knows? But that's gonna be, I think, what's physically gonna need to be done to drive in the water, and the cost of that is gonna really drive a lot of their decisions, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Little appetizer. I'll
Yep.
keep the board
Yeah.
informed, and I'll, keep the game out perhaps.
All right, if that's it, this meeting is adjourned.